Welcome, welcome, everybody. I'm going to put myself back on mute for just a few minutes, and then right at 3 o'clock we'll get started. Welcome, welcome, everybody. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes for everyone to get on and get logged on and get ready to learn. So I will come back here in just a few minutes. Just wanted to let everybody know how excited we are to actually get started today. Welcome everyone to this edition of the 2019 George Cronin Awards for Procurement Excellence webinar series. Today we're going to be working with our 2019 bronze winner from the great state of Minnesota. We have Rachel Doherty, who is the Enterprise Contracts Counsel for the Office of State Procurement in Minnesota. Rachel has been with the Office of State Procurement for about 5 years, and she works primarily with professional and technical contracts. Rachel is a 2001 graduate of the William Mitchell College of Law, and prior to coming to the state, Rachel worked in real estate, and it is her love of transactions that led her to procurement. We are so excited to have Rachel today joining us and taking us through this presentation. Before I turn it over to Rachel, I have a couple of housekeeping notes from us at NASPO. First of all, today's webinar, if you are viewing it, you are eligible for 1 contact hour of UPPCC credit. If you would like to receive 1 contact hour of UPPCC credit after the webinar, please email me. My email address, and I will put this in the chat box, is ldenhart, D as in David, E, N as in Nancy, H-A-R-T, @naspo.org. And I will get you your personalized, unique certificate in less than 24 hours. Also, if everyone would please look at your screen really quickly with me. If you take your mouse up towards, I believe it's the bottom, a little black line is going to appear, and you should see some boxes down there. You should see something that says Q&A. If you click that, that is our question and answer box. So as Rachel is going through her presentation, if you have a question about anything, I ask that you use that question and answer box. And then at the end of the presentation, we will go over all of the questions together as a group. Also, if at any time you're having a technical difficulty, please try to let us know in the chat function, and either myself or Mr. Kevin Miner will reach out to you to see if we can assist you with anything that's going on. There is the chat function down there. And I'm sending a message in it right now. Oh, there's Kevin. He's letting everyone know this is the best way to get a hold of me or him. And once again, if you're having a technical issue, please drop that in there. Now, I know that everybody didn't come to this to hear me talk some more, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Rachel Doherty. Rachel?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am looking outside at a very snowy, cold picture, and I hope many of you are warmer than I am in Minnesota right now. I am going to present on our challenge-based RFP and how that has been a winning solution for Minnesota and the Department of Transportation. So what we're going to go over is the problem that ultimately created this challenge-based RFP. So the Minnesota Department of Transportation came to us, and they had some issues with the procurement, and we worked with them, and that's how we came up with this. I'll go over the solution that we came up while working with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I'll go over some of our accomplishments and some of the neat contracts that we have awarded as part of this challenge-based RFP. And then I will go over, in closing, some challenges and opportunities for the future. So the MnDOT Connected and Automated Vehicle Office approached us, and they had this big question. How can Minnesota lead in the area of connected and automated vehicle technology? So here are some challenges that Department of Transportation faced. They had apprehensive vendors that were very nervous to apply to some of their requests for proposals. The traditional RFP process made it difficult to harness rapidly evolving technology. And what was going on with vendors is they would propose their technology to MnDOT, and then they'd share their technology, and MnDOT would then go put out a request for proposal for something similar or that was like what the vendor had proposed, and then the vendor had to compete with other vendors for that idea. So they essentially were sharing their idea, and then their idea became public. So there was a bit of a trade secret issue there, and also it just really left a bad taste in vendors' mouths, and they quit coming to MnDOT with their innovative technology. And the market was also changing very rapidly. So when we see a piece of connected and automated vehicle technology that MnDOT was interested in, they would put together a request for proposal, and they would have to get the requirements, which were difficult because sometimes you don't exactly have the experts in-house, the engineering experts and whatnot, that are capable of understanding and communicating what we want. So it would take a while to get this request for proposal produced. Then by the time it was out on the street, then that technology might have already been like old technology just because this is changing so fast. The Department of Transportation felt like they didn't really have the opportunity to test and try this new rapidly evolving technology. It was also very difficult to define the requirements for this emerging technology that they were trying to produce. It's not like you can just Google and find out what you need when it is brand new and cutting edge. So MnDOT came to us with these problems, and one of the issues with the traditional RFP is it's open for a fixed period of time. So, in Minnesota, we generally post requests for proposals for at least 21 days. So we have this 21-day blip in time where we're hoping that these vendors come to us with their creative and innovative ideas. So there's a long development process that went into it, and they were also, it kind of forced them to be very narrow, and there wasn't a lot of room for new and different ideas. So MnDOT was getting frustrated with this problem, and they came to us and they wanted us to help them solve it. And just a little bit of background, I am not a transportation expert, but what connected and automated vehicle technology is, a lot of people assume when we're talking about, we call it CAV, that's the name that we've been using in Minnesota. They assume that it's a Tesla roaring down the street without a driver. But connected and automated vehicle technology is a lot more than that, and you'll see that in some of the projects that we have funded through this program. It's things like having apps that communicate with drivers while they're on the road, and it is smart work zones, things like that. So it's far more than just a automatic vehicle. So MnDOT met with us, and I remember sitting down at this meeting and I knew they were going to ask something pretty big of me. And I think there was a little bit of tension in the room just because they came in with this they're just going to say no, and we're not going to get anywhere. And then there's me, and I'm approaching it from oh no, what are they going to ask me now? I personally was very nervous about them asking me to change a statute just for them. We really like to avoid that in Minnesota, and we like to work within the framework that we have and not make special rules for agencies. But what actually happened in that meeting was we had dialogue and a conversation. There was a lot of listening going on, and me hearing from the agency what their struggles were. And it made me think, how can we help them get what they need? And then that listening, in the back and forth, and them understanding that, we have these statutes and we have these rules that we need to follow, and there's value to this process, and this process is important. And this process will help you get ultimately better products and better technology. And just a word about this artwork, I did not want to put anything that was that I legally couldn't use in this presentation. So that is my artwork. I am not an artist. I am a lawyer. But anyways, so I provided my own art. So kind of to describe how everyone felt in those initial meetings. But there's a few keys to innovation that I have learned from this process, and they actually come from one of my favorite comedians, Tina Fey. And they are also the rules, Tina Fey's rules to improv. And if you want to have innovation, I think these 4 things are key. And I don't even think I realized when I went into that meeting with the Department of Transportation that I was necessarily doing things. But I went into that room, first of all, willing to listen, but I also didn't just tell them no. I agreed with them, and I agreed with them tentatively, but I said yes. And agreeing with your partner or someone who's asking you of something, it doesn't mean they're going to get everything that they want or that we're going to throw our statutes and rules out the window, but it's a point that we can start at, and we can build off of that point. The next key to innovation is contributing. You have to be a worthy partner. And rather than just telling MnDOT, like, no, this won't work, we can't do it this way, I brought in the value of procurement and the values of competition and how competition, we don't want to just be funding projects straight off of the street. We want them to go through a process. We want to vet them because then we're ensuring that we are providing something that's quality and we're using taxpayer dollars wisely. And also in this area of connected and automated vehicle technology that we're ensuring that we're also being safe. So you have to contribute something. And once you contribute something, that's when you get that real dialogue going. So once I'm agreeing and contributing, at that point, we're creating something. And we're creating something together, and we're building off of, MnDOT struggles, adding some values of procurement in there, and we're coming up with something that's pretty new. And the other thing that we've all had to remember as part of this process is to adapt. There really are no such things as mistakes in the world of improv. Mistakes are really an opportunity. They're an opportunity to learn and to do something different. So I approach this project with this attitude that, I'm going to stay within my statute and follow the rules that I'm supposed to follow. But if mistakes happen along the way, we're only going to learn from them and make this process better. So those are, whenever you're approaching a project, I think kind of approaching it with this attitude in mind can really ultimately lead to a better product. And if anything, it makes the partners that we're working with feel valued and heard and listened to at the very least. So what is a challenge-based RFP? So rather than deciding on the solution to a problem beforehand, they allow the market to respond with a menu of potential solutions for the government to choose from, and that is from a gentleman named Jason Farah, Code for Canada. And then the firm has been pioneering a technique that substitutes a simple problem statement or challenge for the specs found in more traditional requests or proposals. Show, don't tell. So when we started this process of creating this challenge-based RFP, MnDOT actually named it the Minnesota CAV Challenge. And they just came up with this name out of nowhere. But when I started doing research about different kinds of request for proposal methods, what they ultimately did, what we chose to do, is actually called a challenge-based RFP. So they named their project very appropriately. But this is the idea that, we're not going to tell the vendors, we're not going to lay out super tight requirements. Instead, we're going to be a little more open to what the vendors and what the vendor community is, what is out there. So this is what this is MnDOT's request. They wanted that request for proposal open for an indefinite amount of time. So not the fixed 21-day period or even 3 months. This RFP has been open since September of 2018, and it's open to this day for vendors to respond. But they wanted it open for an indefinite amount of time because when these vendors are coming up with these solutions and this CAV technology, they don't want to wait. They want to get that technology used and tested. So it gives them an opportunity to go to MnDOT, not on the state's terms, but when they are ready to share their idea. Previously, when you're open for just a fixed amount of time, you're hoping that the right vendor with the right kind of technology comes to you in that narrow time period. They also wanted it to be open to a wide variety of connected and automated vehicle solutions. So they didn't want to just look for one kind of technology, let's say self-driving cars or self-driving snowplows. They wanted to be open to a number of different things. They also felt like the dialogue with vendors was very important. They knew this process was new. It was new to the vendor community, new to the state, and they wanted to be able to gauge how vendors were interacting with this process. So before vendors actually submit a formal proposal, they have a pre-proposal meeting or an opportunity to have a pre-proposal meeting with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Like many transportation departments, our MnDOT, they have limitations of how they can use some of their federal dollars and even how they can use state dollars. So they had to be, you can't just propose a solution for any corridor, any travel corridor in Minnesota. It has to be specific ones that are funded with state dollars. So that was one thing they wanted to be very clear about, and they don't want vendors wasting their time and proposing something in a municipality that MnDOT necessarily can't work in. So they wanted to be upfront about their limitations with vendors, and if a vendor was on a wrong track with a proposal, they wanted to give them an opportunity to either fix it or maybe decide that it wasn't worth their time to propose given MnDOT's constraints. They also did not want to receive any trade secrets. You know, when vendors were coming to MnDOT with their ideas, they were always hesitant to put out a request for proposal because a lot of times, you know, that is the vendor's trade secret information that it's based on. So if a vendor wants to provide anything that they consider trade secret, they have to do so in a meeting where they are taking their materials with them. They really wanted the ability to offer contracts off of this request for proposal to vendors that met MnDOT's goals. So now our needs. First and foremost, the Office of State Procurement requires fair and open competition. And this is a statutory requirement for us. We have consistent requirements that all vendors are evaluated against. And this is written into our professional technical contracting statute. And I will say we are very lucky in Minnesota to have a very flexible statute for the most part that allows us a lot of discretion and ability to do things like this. And that's something when I get into challenges and opportunities that you have to be aware of what kind of statutes you're dealing with. But we wanted clear parameters and guidelines for vendors to operate within. We wanted vendors, when they go through this process, we want them to trust it, like they hopefully trust other processes in the Office of State Procurement. So we really wanted to be clear about certain things, like I was concerned initially when MnDOT wanted this proposal open for an indefinite amount of time. Well, how do we decide when to evaluate? How do we make that decision? I did not want MnDOT to be able to arbitrarily decide, oh, wow, this proposal looks really exciting. Let's evaluate it now. I wanted a more systematic approach to it. So the way we structured it is there are several different deadlines that are released as part of this proposal. So every proposal, I'm just using this as an example, received by March 30th will be evaluated in the month of April. So we have that consistent, and there's usually review periods about every other month on this. I think MnDOT is considering slowing it down just because one of the challenges of a program like this is when you select contracts for award, there is a heavy lift in getting those contracts negotiated and executed. So that was something that was important to me, that we had those clear parameters and guidelines and vendors knew what to expect and when they would hear from MnDOT and what the process would be like. And then as part of our statutory requirements, we have to have both subjective and objective criteria. And one of the challenges with this is how do you evaluate price when you are getting such a variety of solutions in. But I wanted that objective piece built in, and usually that is centered around price. And what we did is the proposals are given a specific amount of points based on the available funding. So if they're in, I think, if they're 5 to 10% or under 10% of available funding, then they get the full points. And then there's another tier where they get, a middle amount of points, and then the lowest for proposals that consume the most of the available funding. So that's the objective criteria they used. And then just having that systematic approach to vendor selection was very important. And one thing that, we communicate that deadline of when all proposals received by this date will be reviewed. And another thing is every vendor, like how do you score a work zone safety initiative against a self-driving bus? Those are two very different things. But what MnDOT focuses on is some broad goals that every project could meet. And we'll go over those in the next few slides. So we did agree to that indefinite period of time. We have review dates that are specified in the RFP, which I mentioned approximately every other month. And the vendors are evaluated against MnDOT's stated connected and automated vehicle goals, which are written into the request for proposal document. Vendors have that opportunity for a pre-proposal meeting. And another thing that we do to increase transparency is vendor debriefs after evaluation. So we have, when a vendor is not selected, they have an opportunity with the RFP administrator to go over their proposal and what fell short and what could have been better. And that RFP administrator is somebody who did not play a role in the scoring of the proposals, and they're really only reiterating what the evaluator said. Another thing related to that systematic approach is we have the same team that scores all proposals. And as you guys probably know, people don't always stay in their jobs forever. And it was actually right around the time that I was presenting this at NASPO annual conference that the Connected and Automated Vehicle Director was promoted to the leadership within MnDOT. So we did have to make an adjustment, and we replaced one team member, but the team still stays, the core is the same. So that's one thing that we try to, that's important for consistency's sake. Then another thing that's really interesting that I think works really well and is something that a value that I've learned from this process is we have subject matter experts that are reviewing only the relevant proposals. And what these subject matter experts do, in a given cycle, MnDOT might receive one proposal that relates to connected and automated vehicle technology outreach and engagement. Then they receive another one that relates to work zone safety. And then maybe a third proposal that has to do with a cell phone application that you use while driving. All three things are different, but you have subject matter experts that review each one of those proposals, and then they come and they meet with the evaluation team. The evaluation team can ask questions, and the subject matter experts can tell the team what they thought of the proposal. And it really, I think it uses the subject matter experts' time really wisely because they're only having to review that one proposal, and then it's the core team that is scoring every single proposal. So that's something that I think works really well for this. So the areas of importance that MnDOT was focusing on, and the thing is when you're drafting one of these RFP that is more open in nature, like the challenge-based RFP here, you don't want the vendors just, throwing anything at the wall and seeing what will stick. You want to have some guidelines and give them some ideas on what you're looking for. So some things that were important to transportation were they wanted to be able to advance connected and automated vehicle technology in winter weather, which is important in Minnesota, and we actually do a lot of cold weather testing here. So this is one area that they really wanted to promote. They also wanted to develop specific corridors for connected and automated vehicle technology. They have a goal of improving work zone safety, and they also want to build public trust. The public trust part is very important because too often when we hear about connected and automated vehicle technology, we are hearing about a Tesla getting into a crash and hurting a pedestrian or worse. They also want to improve mobility for populations that struggle with that, and then just overall improving traffic safety. So those are the areas of importance that they communicated in their request for proposal. And then their goals. Their overall goals is they wanted to leverage public-private partnerships. They wanted to prepare Minnesota's infrastructure, policy, and workforce for connected and automated vehicle technology. And when I talk about the projects, you'll see how there is actually a lot of preparation for our infrastructure that we need to do in order to have more connected and automated vehicles. They wanted to allow for opportunities to test and deploy advancing connected and automated vehicle technology. And they really want the public to better understand the benefits and limitations of cab technology and have the opportunity to give input. And just overall, they really wanted to jumpstart and be leaders when it comes to accelerating and implementing connected and automated vehicle technology in Minnesota. So their scoring criteria. This scoring criteria is the same in every single request for proposal. We ask each vendor to define their concept, and they're scored on that. They have to state how they are aligned with stated Minnesota goals and priorities. So those goals and priorities that I just mentioned, the proposal should touch in some way how we're meeting those. We want to see a work plan that tells us how they're going to implement their technology. And then another thing is really important is risk assessment and strategy. There are risks that are associated with this technology, and MnDOT wanted to see how the vendors were going to address that. They also wanted to see the experience that the vendors have in this area, and then what is their process along the way for quality assurance and quality control. And then last but not least is cost. So, and one other word about scoring. At this point, we've sort of established an average score that a vendor needs to get into this program or to have their technology accepted. And we have not, if a proposal comes in significantly lower than that average, they will not be accepted. But we don't, for instance, if the median score, for example, is 65, and there was a proposal that was rejected because they were at 63, we're not going to accept a proposal that is 61 points just because it maybe came in as like the top scoring that cycle. They still have to meet that average over time to be considered for awards. So now I'm going to go over the fun stuff, at least what I think is pretty fun. Some of the things that we're actually working on right now, contracts that have been awarded as part of this project. So this is a 40-foot, I still can't say this word, I keep on trying, autonomous bus state consortium. So when you go from city to city around the United States, you might notice that the buses all often look quite a bit alike. The thing is, municipalities tend to buy the same kind of buses. So when we are purchasing, we're considering a connected and automated vehicle bus, we want to have states and municipalities and transit organizations that are on the same page. So MnDOT has joined a consortium that is working to define locations for testing the bus, creating and operating a financial plan. They're going to establish the specifications that you would need for a connected and automated bus that a transit agency could use. They're actually probably going to deploy these and test them in specific markets, and then ultimately kind of come to a group decision on whether they should pursue an automated bus. So that's one thing that, and that really kind of leverages the public-private partnership goal that MnDOT stated. So when I mentioned earlier that our infrastructure needs quite a bit of updating in order to actually be able to support connected and automated vehicle technology, as part of this process, I learned that a connected and automated vehicle can consume more than 3,000 times the data that a given person can on any given day. So that is a lot of bandwidth that these vehicles require, and most states do not have infrastructure that is ready for it. And what this vendor is going to do is analyze the right-of-way infrastructure, broadband and wireless, and see like where that would be best deployed. And another goal that this might help accomplish is, at least in Minnesota, we struggle in having rural broadband. So this will simultaneously kind of give us a roadmap of how we need to update our IT infrastructure around the state. So this has, I'm guessing that this infrastructure assessment is not going to be just a value to the Department of Transportation, but it'll be a great value to Department of Employment and Economic Development, and other agencies will be able to use this, and cities as well, just to see where we need more, we need to put more bandwidth for actual deployment. And this is another one that I've enjoyed all of these and all of these projects, but I like the ones where you can really like see what an impact it could have. So we, apparently this is a crash truck that you see on this picture in front of you. And what a crash truck, they're deployed in a work zone to absorb the impact of traffic that mistakenly enters the work zone. It's considered one of the most dangerous jobs because essentially there are people that could be crashing into the back of that truck at a high speed, putting the driver at risk. And so what we're doing here is we're retrofitting one of these crash trucks with an attenuator, and it allows it to allows the second truck to be autonomous and follow it. So it removes a human from a dangerous job, and it's like that truck behind us is basically following the breadcrumbs that the truck in front of it is I guess we call them e-crumbs when it relates to wireless technology. But this is something that was actually a really good, will be very good to deploy, because these trucks are very slow moving, and that's perfect for connected and automated vehicles. I've mentioned before, like, you know, we're not looking for Teslas that are speeding down the freeway. Slow moving vehicle really helps the situation be controlled should anything go wrong, so it's lower risk. And then this is a brand new one. I did not present this one at the NASPO annual conference because it wasn't awarded yet, but we've since awarded it. And I really am excited for this one because I will actually be able to drive down the Smart Snelling Avenue and have an app on my phone that will tell me, basically, if I'm about to run a red light, the app will tell me, like, warning, you could run a red light. And then if you're sitting at a red light, it will tell you, like, the light is about to turn green. And how this works is there's like a sensor that is placed on the traffic light that communicates with it, and then it communicates to people who have a specific app on their phone and lets them, communicates about road hazards. So phase 1 is the red light and green light communication. Phase 2, this will be great for Minnesota, but it will communicate with snowplows, and the light will turn green as the snowplow approaches. And then phase 3 will actually be safety warnings for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's hoping that the cyclists and pedestrians have the app installed on phones that are communicating with them. But what's neat about this corridor that they chose, it is very close to the Minnesota Department of Transportation's their metro area traffic facility, and it is close to a shopping mall, and it's also close to a couple of universities. So it's a really great opportunity to advertise the app and get people using it, so we can see how it actually communicates with people on this roadway. So this is one of the newer contracts, and I'm excited to see, this is actual people like interacting with connected and automated vehicle technology. So it should be pretty cool. So that's one of our newer ones. And then we've had 3 others that have been awarded. They're 2 of them relate to public engagement and outreach, and we had 2 vendors that actually proposed at about the same time, and one was more focused on public engagement, like actually engaging the public with this technology, more like in the Smart Snelling Avenue, like in working on getting people to download the app and know what they're supposed to do and know what to expect. Whereas the outreach is more communicating, this is what is happening in the world of connected and automated vehicle technology around the state of Minnesota. So that one's more big picture. But what was interesting is the 2 vendors proposed very similar things. And, MnDOT was able to look and kind of see what each vendor was good at and then right size the scope of work for each vendor. And it's not quite partnering, but it's very close. So the vendors will be in communication with one another to some degree because what they're doing is related. And then the last one that they've recently awarded is a automated bus, and it's a tiny little bus in Rochester, Minnesota, is where the Mayo Clinic is. So there is a lot of people there that don't have cars because they are flying in there for medical treatment. And basically this small little automated bus will help people navigate the campus. So that kind of gets that mobility. So we'll see how that one actually is deployed. So we've done, I think 7 or 8 projects at this point have been awarded, actually, or have contracts executed, and we have some projects that have been awarded, and we're in the process of negotiating the contracts. And what's interesting about, one thing is the RFP process can be a little bit faster now that we have that RFP published and waiting, but sometimes it does take a bit longer to get contracts in place, which kind of brings us to our challenges and opportunities. So a few challenges and opportunities that we've identified is we would really like to introduce this framework to other state agencies. We are very lucky in the state of Minnesota to have a really great relationship with the Transportation Department. We work very closely with one another, and there's a lot of trust between us, which helped, was one of the reasons why we were able to launch this program so successfully. But we are looking for other state agencies to work with. How do you determine which projects this is appropriate for? How do you ensure that there are adequate oversight and controls? And we also, what does a protest look like? So, things to prepare for if you want to launch your own challenge-based RFP. You have to prepare yourself for a lot of questions. This is new to the vendors. It's also new to probably procurement folks within agencies and maybe around your central procurement office. And people wonder, like, how is this going to work? What's the execution going to be like? And I find for this one, you really have to embrace that, that fourth point about innovation, where, you have to be willing to adapt and kind of see like the questions as opportunities to learn and further develop. I feel like we actually learned a lot by just talking about this and kind of going through scenarios and my supervisor asking me questions. Well, how are you going to ensure this happens? You also have to ensure you have to have appropriate bandwidth. This is, once you get that request for proposal released, there's not as much work on the part of the agency, but there can be a lot of work on the behalf of contract staff. There is a heavier procurement load for Minnesota Department of Transportation. I've had a team member that has been involved. It's either been her or myself that has gone to just about every single evaluation meeting just to see how this is going and making sure that we're providing that adequate oversight and control. I also like having someone at those meetings because it helps me recognize when there are additional needs for a particular contract. I work in professional technical contracting, and just to the crash truck, I am not familiar with shipping gigantic vehicles around the state or around this country. And that TMA truck, I think it's starting out in Philadelphia, and then it's going to go to Florida for some testing, and then it comes back to Minnesota. So I had to work very closely with people on our acquisition staff that are more familiar with dealing with large vehicles and shipping them and storing them. And so that was something that I was glad to be aware of and start making preparations so we could get that contract executed. And then the funding piece, the funding on this one, they generally get an appropriation from the legislature and possibly other sources that they, and it can vary a lot depending on the kind of project and the funding that they have. So it's just something to consider and be aware of. There are also, timing issues that are important to consider. Like, do we have, when they accept a certain proposal, like, are they able to do it at that time? And that depends, like, around MnDOT, because, the Connected and Automated Vehicle Office will bring the project forward, but usually it touches another area of MnDOT, and they have to make sure that they can actually execute a contract at that time. And then the transparency piece, I feel like it's very, very important with new processes to be transparent, so you have to be prepared for that and what that means with your public data laws and whatnot. So what are appropriate projects? They should be things that are low risk of non-award. I'm very excited for all of those projects that we have funded with the Minnesota Department of Transportation and that we've executed contracts for. But every single one of them, they were not critical needs. If we had not awarded a contract for an automated crash truck, the world would keep on spinning at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. So it has to be a low risk of non-award, because when these come in, you may not necessarily get things that you're necessarily looking for, and you have to be prepared for that. So kind of with that, it should be like a non-critical need. We don't want agencies necessarily going out for things that are mission critical, that will that could hurt their organizations if they don't get someone on board fast enough. It also should be something where you're relatively flexible in your needs. You don't want to have if you have to have really rigid requirements, this is probably not the right process for you. It works really well when we can pose a problem to solve or define broad goals for vendors to meet. On these, requirements are either unknown, hard to define, or rapidly changing. So where do you start? If you are looking to try this at your agency, you want to find an agency or user that you trust and propose an idea. You can also, depending on when you get involved with the procurement, I know here, I always beg agencies, please tell me when you have something, that might be complicated or hard. I'd like to be involved in the beginning. It always helps us when we're involved in the very beginning, because that's when at least I can recognize the opportunity and the space for innovation. Areas that I think are particularly suited to challenge-based RFPs, public health. I have met with our Department of Public Health and just proposed this idea to them, because our public health, they have to do a lot of outreach and engagement, and sometimes we don't always know the best way to engage certain communities. So there might be some opportunities there to come up with some ways to work with underserved communities. Same kind of thing with human services. Is there ways to creatively deploy some of the things that that humans need to go about their daily lives? Possibly in housing too, there's lots of interesting and innovative models that relate to solving public housing issues. So that's another area where this might be appropriate. But really, finding an agency that you can work with and trust if you're doing this for the first time is really important, which kind of gets to the next, some lessons that we've learned. Trust between procurement and program is essential. And we're lucky to have had that with transportation from the start. And, when we started embarking on this, and there were a couple things that I thought were maybe off about their process that I would like them to do differently, they were very open to that, and they trusted me. They knew that I wasn't doing it to make their jobs harder or to get in the way of, the way they were doing business. So the trust is important. And then that oversight piece is also really important. You want to establish it in the beginning, and it should exist through the lifespan of the project. We are going to have a meeting, I think, next month about what the future of the Connected and Automated Vehicle Challenge looks like. What are some things that we can do differently? What are some things that we can do better? And just, we're going to keep on the process of continuous improvement and making this better. The vendor dialogue is also key. I know sometimes, at least here, agencies get really nervous about talking to vendors, but as part of this process, I think it's important because it's new. And that debrief after evaluation can be really key in helping them understand. When the process is very open, and it can be harder for them to understand why their project wasn't accepted, funded, or awarded. So having that debrief can be a great opportunity. There was one vendor who came in, and MnDOT really liked their idea, but the execution of it, there was some issues with it. And having that vendor conversation and saying, we like this, but, should you apply to this again? This is what needs, this is the area that you need to focus on, can really ultimately get a better product for all involved. And, the other thing is just be very aware of your state statutes around procurement. Like I said, in Minnesota, we're lucky to have a relatively flexible procurement statute that allows us to do this. I understand it isn't always as straightforward with, what you have to work with. But, pay attention to your statutes and rules, and hopefully if you don't have the flexibility, it's maybe something you can ask for, ask for from the legislature, and hopefully have the trust to actually have the ability to execute this. It's been very good for transportation, and they are very excited about the stuff that they're deploying, and it's been very great for us to be a partner with them in actually leading and getting and actually being innovative and pushing us forward as a state. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, And if you have any transportation-specific questions, you can email that gentleman named Ron Bisick. He's the RFP administrator that I've worked with throughout this whole entire process, and he's going to be able to direct you to folks in MnDOT if you have any specific transportation-related questions. And with that, if you have any questions now, I am happy to answer them to the best of my abilities.
Hey, Rachel, it's Lori. Wonderful, wonderful job. We've had a couple questions come in, so I figured I'll just take you through these. The first I have is from Don. Don would like to talk about, is the funding disclosed in the RFP?
Their funding is, it changes on a fairly regular basis, so we do not disclose the amount of funding that's available. And it changes based on if they've received any sort of grant money or when their appropriation from the legislature comes through. So the funding, and if they don't spend everything, they might have a residual amount from, the last time they received funding in their, and for lack of a better word, their account balance. So no, we do not disclose the amount. But would a vendor, if they were to ask as part of a question, I would always encourage MnDOT to be as straightforward as they possibly can at the time the question is asked. It would not be something I would necessarily consider a secret. And I think depending on what kind of project you're doing, it would be absolutely appropriate to disclose the amount of funding that you're dealing with. And if it's a multiple award, that's less harmful, although I just always say if you disclose, if it's single award and you say you have $1 million, it'll be like The Price is Right. So just kind of knowing it's a project by project basis really to gauge whether you should include the amount of funding that's available.
Thank you so much, Rachel. My next question is from Kathy. Kathy wants to know if, would you be able to share a copy of the CAV RFP?
The CAV RFP is available from the Minnesota Department of Transportation's website. I don't know why I cannot manage to save a copy to my computer for the life of me. I probably do actually have one if I looked hard enough, but Minnesota CAV Challenge. If you Google it, it will come up in MnDOT's procurement opportunities, and you can get a copy right online. I also can send one to you, Lori, and
Sounds
if
great.
anyone asks, they can absolutely welcome to have that.
All right, so if anybody would like to see a copy of that, Rachel is going to send one to me, and so please feel free to reach out to me. I've got another question, Rachel, and this one is touching on something that I feel like is a really good question. That is, if what was exciting to the Department of Transportation was possibly a trade secret, how, if all, do you accommodate trade secrets in the executed contract, but still require its use?
Our executed contracts are all, that's all public information in the state of Minnesota. I don't think we could actually put a trade secret in an executed contract. And, we are moving actually in the state to really discourage people, and of course, they come up and it happens, but we like people to take their trade secrets with them. But once and if that issue came up, there would probably be like a MnDOT specific question, how they deal with it. They're going to have their own process. But it's something that they are largely trying to avoid just because they don't want to, this is like rapidly evolving technology and they don't want to deal with trade secret litigation.
I don't think any of us want to.
No, we definitely don't.
Right.
So they've really taken the path of like avoidance along the way. And once the contract's executed, I do think to some degree the vendors, what they want, they want their technology deployed and they want it tested. So, we haven't dealt so far with an issue where a vendor has said, like, this is a trade secret, we can't have this in the executed contract. We haven't dealt with that yet.
Thank you. Let's see here. I have another question from Philip. Philip would like to know, after a vendor goes through a debriefing, are they allowed to submit another proposal later?
Yes, we have allowed vendors to submit another proposal. And, one of the key things is we have the RFP administrator who's not scored, he's not an evaluator, and he's basically saying, like, this is where things went wrong. We have had vendors, we had one where they submitted the exact same proposal and they changed the dates, and, and it was the same result. And in, the debrief, they kind of said, proposals are scored. There's an average score, and your proposal did not meet the average score, and you submitted the exact same proposal, and you probably should not have expected that to change much. You actually have to do something different in order to get a different score, which should have maybe been common sense. But nonetheless, we have had people submit multiple times, and that's something that I would actually like to touch on with MnDOT in our meeting is how do we want to address that? We have we have a program here, our MnSite, which is IT staff augmentation, and and that's a master contract program we have, and that is open as of right now indefinitely, and vendors have to wait a month before submitting a proposal again. They have to go through a vendor debrief, and then if they don't get accepted a second time, we have them wait 6 months. And just to protect their bandwidth, that's something I would actually advise MnDOT to do, is not letting people apply over and over and over again, and maybe making them take a break, just because they're we actually we want them to submit good proposals that we can possibly fund, and that's part of the vendor debrief conversation, is like, this is where you fell short. And we're not, I've learned a lot from MnDOT actually doing this, and I'm encouraging it more across agencies as well to do the vendor debrief.
I think that sounds just like a really good part of setting up that kind of vendor relationship and dialogue that you really need to have a successful challenge RFP.
Yeah, in general, we've found like a lot of my team members have been nervous about doing the having the conversations, and not related to this challenge-based RFP, but there was a vendor that has done all kinds of business with the state. It's a big engineering firm, and one of my team members took the time to do a debrief with them, and after they said, people expect it to be adversarial, but they were just like, thank you so much for taking the time. Nobody has ever taken the time to talk with us about how our proposals could be better. Like, we feel better prepared to respond. And that's what I would want every vendor to come away from the challenge-based RFP. I feel better able to respond to this now. And then we get higher quality proposals, and there's just trust that's built between us and the vendor community.
Absolutely. It looks like we got 2 more questions. Next, I have one from Joe, who wants to know, has Minnesota used this method for any other projects, or are there any pending?
We have not used it for any other projects. I have been in conversation with the Department of Health just because I see a lot of opportunities there to do something like this. And it's something I think agencies need to prepare themselves for, sometimes ahead of when we go into legislative session. MnDOT's kind of lucky to have this little pool of money that they can spend this way, but not all agencies get that kind of money appropriated in that same exact way. And one thing we're trying to get better that I think will allow us to do more of these is to be ahead of the procurements. And often when they come to us, we're they're just waiting for our signature, and then they're ready to go. I would rather see that 6 months ahead. And so we're trying to kind of create that idea with agencies that reach out to us ahead of time. We're trying to do some really cool things, and you have an opportunity to be part of that if you reach out sooner rather than later. And that's just what we've found across the board. The sooner that we can be involved, the more value that we can add as procurement, and the more that we're seen as partners that have something to offer that adds value. It's much easier to do early than late in the process. So that's part of our initiative to spread this more, is to also be getting ahead. And that's where, we already had this great relationship with MnDOT, and, and are just kind of looking for the same thing to happen in another agency. So I've had conversations with health, and I know that their procurement people are trying to spot these as well, and things that it would work for.
We have another question that came in, Rachel, who wants to know, so with the evolving supplier involvement throughout the RFP, have contract changes from supplier coordination or changing requirements ever been an issue?
You know, there was the IT infrastructure assessment. When that initial request for proposal came in, I mean, it was huge and it was very, very expensive. And it was just something that was way too big for us to take on, like all that they wanted to do. And the person that I have involved on my team, other than myself in this, she is a negotiation specialist, and it's really great to have her. I used to go to almost all of the meetings, but she is the one that's, I really like having her there because she's really great at listening for the things that are, listening to the evaluators and hearing the things that they maybe aren't as excited about, that they don't want, and then working with the vendors to get a contract that is actually like right-sized. And that IT infrastructure was one that had to be right-sized. We had to get that scope of work down and make it more appropriate for the amount of dollars we had available, and just really like actually what we needed. So that was something where the requirements changed and we worked with the vendor. And that's one of the maybe the more challenging aspects of this, is there is a little bit heavier lift on the negotiation side, because you have to be careful to pick out the things that you want and then that you maybe don't want. Some of them are way more straightforward, like the TMA truck with the automated crash truck. That was a pretty like straightforward, easy one where we didn't have to do a lot of changes, but not all of them are like that. And it's just really important to take a critical look and really listen to your customer, in this case, the Department of Transportation, and what they want, and then try to achieve that in the actual contract document.
And it looks like we're down to our last question, Ms. Rachel, and they're wanting to know, who leads these debrief sessions? Is it the Office of Procurement? Is it the Department of Transportation program, or the evaluation committee lead? Who's leading these debriefs?
The RFP administrator, and he is a professional at MnDOT who does, he works with the Connected and Automated Vehicle Technology Office on their contracts. So I think MnDOT has these individuals like sprinkled throughout the agency that are helping each area of MnDOT with their procurements. So he's a procurement person who's the RFP administrator who does those debriefs. The key with the debriefs is it should not be somebody who is on the evaluation team, because they, like the vendor can get mad at them much more easily than they can somebody who's just telling them, this is what the evaluator said, this is what happened. It's more passive, and you know, he has no influence over it. So I think it's key that the person not be part of the evaluation team and kind of be a little bit arm's length from the, you know, a procurement person is probably better than the program people that are evaluating it. And when I've done that with like my team, we'll work with procurement people at other agencies to do debriefs. So generally, that's something that's very suited for procurement versus the business people who actually are going to be using the technology or the product.
Well, Rachel, that wraps up all the questions that we have, and I can't thank you enough for being here today and for presenting such a wonderful presentation and going over this really, really innovative way of doing RFPs. I do have a couple of housekeeping comments, guys. Don't forget, if you need a UPPCC contact hour, a copy of the slide deck, or a copy of that CAV RFP, email me, Lori Denhart, that's ldenhart@naspo.org, and I will get that to you. Also, as soon as the webinar has concluded, you are going to be redirected to a survey page. Guys, I know everybody gets survey fatigue, but this is 3 to 5 super short questions that will help us significantly improve the way that we produce webinars at NASPO, and making sure that we are still producing those quality content-heavy webinars for you. So please take the survey. Rachel, again, thank you so much for joining us today. You did an amazing job, And everybody, I hope you can hear me, but I'm clapping for our 2019 Bronze Cronin Award winner, the great state of Minnesota, and Ms. Rachel Doherty. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right, thanks, everybody. Everyone, have a great week, and it's Friday Eve, which is always good news.
Yes.